My son hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. There's no dramatic ending to point to, no shouting match, no slammed door. Just silence. A slow, careful silence that began like a fog and then stayed. He's 27 now, and the last words he said to me, really said, not just mumbled through gritted teeth, were, "You never listened, Mom." And I suppose that's true. I used to think I was a good mother. Not perfect, of course. No one is. But I packed lunches. I read bedtime stories. I attended every parent-teacher conference. I said, "I love you," every day. But I also said other things. Things like, "Are you really wearing that? And you know better. And don't make me regret trusting you." Things that sounded like love in my head, but probably landed like judgment in his. I didn't notice how often my love came with conditions until the day he stopped answering my calls. It wasn't sudden. At first, he just took longer to reply, then stopped replying to texts, then stopped picking up entirely. His voicemail still played the same recording, cheerful, polite, with that trace of sarcasm only I could hear. "Hey, it's Alex. Leave a message, I guess." I left exactly 17 messages over 2 years. The last one was simple. "Alex, it's Mom. I just want to know you're okay. I'm not calling to ask for anything. Just, okay. That's all." No reply. The silence has become a kind of wallpaper in my life. Always there, quietly framing everything I do. I keep thinking, if I could just go back and watch myself in those early years, like a home video I'd somehow forgotten, what would I see? Would I see the little ways I chipped at his confidence? The tone in my voice when he told me he wanted to be a photographer instead of a doctor? Would I catch the flickers of shame I didn't intend to place in his hands? People like to talk about mother's intuition. But we never talk about a mother's blindness, the things we refuse to see in ourselves because we're too busy worrying about what they might become. He was such a quiet child, not withdrawn, just observant. He noticed things when I changed my hair, when I cried quietly at the sink after arguing with his father, when I smiled too widely to cover exhaustion. He never said much, but I think he stored everything. And now I'm left holding a box of memories I'm not sure I deserve to keep. I still have his baby blanket, the one with tiny airplanes. I keep it in a drawer, not because I think he'll ever want it, but because it's the last thing he clung to without question. I remember the day I drove him to college, how he stared out the window the whole way. I thought he was nervous. Now I wonder if he was saying goodbye to me even then. The thing people don't tell you about losing a child this way is that it doesn't feel like grief at first. It feels like guilt, then defensiveness, then confusion, then, finally, a quiet acceptance that maybe you weren't who you thought you were. I have coffee every morning in the same mug he gave me at 16. It says Sucker One Mom in a crooked, handmade font he clearly designed himself. The irony isn't lost on me. Some days I wonder if keeping the mug is an act of hope or punishment, but I still use it. I sit by the window, drink slowly, stare out into the yard where he once built a snowman that leaned so far left, it collapsed before we could take a photo. I didn't laugh. I scolded him for not packing the base tighter. He was 7, and I crushed the moment. That's what I remember most now. The crushed moments. The ones that felt so small then, but echo like thunder in hindsight. There's a photo of him on my desk. High school graduation. He's smiling, but not at me. His eyes are off camera, locked on something else. Probably his girlfriend at the time. Probably someone who made him feel seen without having to earn it. Sometimes I want to tell my story, to explain, to give context. But then I stop myself, because that's the instinct that got me here. The explaining, the need to be understood instead of understanding. So I don't write him letters anymore. I don't send birthday cards. I don't try to add him on new platforms. I just wait. And some mornings, when the sun hits the table just right, I let myself imagine what I'd say if he showed up at the door. I don't imagine a hug, or forgiveness, or even eye contact. Just this. I see it now, Alex. I see what I didn't see before, and I'm sorry. There's a phrase therapists use that I didn't understand the first time I heard it. Parenting from fear. I thought it meant panicking when your toddler runs toward traffic, or waking in the middle of the night because your baby hasn't cried in 6 hours. But it's bigger than that. It means raising a child like you're always waiting for something to go wrong, and teaching them to live in that shadow with you. That was me. I parented from fear. I feared he'd be too soft, too trusting, too strange for the world to accept. So I tried to preempt the pain. I hovered. I corrected. I warned him about people who didn't deserve his attention, about dreams that wouldn't pay the bills, about feelings that made you weak. I told myself I was preparing him, that I was arming him. But I wasn't. I was clipping his wings. He was 8 the first time I scolded him for crying at a birthday party. Another boy had made fun of his homemade gift, a little bracelet with lettered beads, spelling out best friend. Don't give things like that, I told him in the car afterward. Boys don't always appreciate stuff like that. He didn't answer, just looked out the window. That silence became a pattern. And I thought I was winning. He got stronger, less emotional. He stopped showing me his sketches, stopped asking me to read stories at bedtime. He started closing his bedroom door, and I praised his independence. When he got his first C on a math quiz in middle school, I didn't ask if he was okay. I told him he needed to focus more. I'm just saying this because I believe in you, I added. I meant it, but I said it like a weapon. In high school, he joined theater. It was the first time I saw him light up in years. He came alive on stage, loud, expressive, funny. But when he told me he was thinking of studying acting in college, I laughed. Not kindly. You'll be broke and waiting tables before you land a real role, I said. Be realistic. I thought I was protecting him. Instead, I watched something in him dim. He applied for pre-med the next week, and I praised his maturity, but I never saw him act again. Looking back now, I realize I parented like love was a performance and discipline was applause. I applauded him when he was tough, when he didn't cry, when he worked hard even though he hated it, and I withheld affection when he pulled away. I confused control with care, and he grew up thinking love meant earning peace, not receiving it. The last time we had a real fight, he was 24. It was Thanksgiving. He came late, brought a friend, a man, and didn't warn me. I wasn't rude, but I was careful, overly nice. That sugary tone women use when we're deeply uncomfortable, but trying not to show it. After dinner, when everyone else was gone, I asked if the friend was just a friend. He stared at me like he couldn't believe I was still asking those kinds of questions. "He's my partner," he said. "We live together." I remember the words that came out of my mouth next. Sharp, instinctive. "I wish you'd told me earlier. It's a lot to spring on me like this." He stood up. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd make it about you." He left that night. Didn't come for Christmas. Didn't reply to my birthday message that spring. And then silence. What I didn't see then, what I see now, is that I kept asking him to trust me while giving him every reason not to. I demanded honesty while punishing him for it. I asked him to share, then criticized what he brought to the table. It's taken me years to see that I was not the mother I thought I was. That love without acceptance isn't love. It's performance. And my son got tired of performing. So he stopped, and now I sit in this quiet house, surrounded by framed memories he no longer visits, and I replay the things I can never unsay. But still, there's something in me, small, stubborn, that wants to do better. Not to erase the past, but to stop repeating it. And maybe, just maybe, if I can learn how to sit with the silence without demanding answers, I might finally be ready to hear him if he ever decides to speak again. Adolescence is supposed to be messy. Hormones, rebellion, bad haircuts, slammed doors. It's all part of the deal, right? But with Alex, it wasn't chaos. It was withdrawal. He didn't lash out or sneak around or come home smelling like smoke. He just faded, quietly, deliberately, like someone lowering a curtain 1 inch at a time. It started when he was 13. He stopped asking me to walk him to the bus stop, stopped telling me what books he was reading, started spending hours in his room, sketching or listening to music I never heard. And I, being the kind of mother who thought I was owed transparency, took it personally. "What are you drawing?" I'd ask. "Just stuff." "Can I see?" He'd hesitate. "It's not done." I never pushed harder. I thought I was respecting his space. But the truth is, I was afraid of what I might find. That maybe his art revealed a boy I didn't know how to mother. And it did. I found one of his sketchbooks once, half hidden under a pile of laundry he never seemed to care about. The drawings were beautiful, haunting even. Mostly faces, all of them looking away. Some were crying, some were screaming. Not one of them was smiling. I never asked about them, just quietly put the book back. And when he didn't bring it up, I convinced myself it was just teenage angst. But I knew. There were other signs, too. In 8th grade, his best friend moved away. He didn't mention it until a week after the boy left. "We still text," he said, but I saw how he stopped sitting near the phone, how he started skipping lunch and said he wasn't hungry. The school called once, said he'd been caught alone in the art room during class. I showed up furious, ready to scold him for ditching. But when I found him, he was crouched over a canvas, completely lost in whatever world he'd built to escape mine. He didn't even look up. When I asked him why he was there, he simply said, "It's quieter here." That night, I told his father we needed to nip this moody artist thing in the bud. "We're not raising a tortured soul," I said. "He needs structure, discipline." His father didn't say much. He never did when it came to emotions. So I took the lead. I made a schedule, enforced study hours, took away sketchbooks during school nights. When he protested, I reminded him that Rules exist for a reason. He obeyed, on the surface, but something in him hardened. We used to watch movies together on Fridays, animation, sci-fi, anything he liked. He'd curl next to me on the couch, blanket wrapped around us both. But after that year, he stopped joining. "I've got homework," he'd say. Or, "I'm tired." I tried to make him feel guilty. "We used to love this." He shrugged. "Maybe you did." That cut deeper than I let on. But instead of asking why, I snapped, "Well, I'm sorry I enjoy spending time with you." And he retreated further. By sophomore year, we barely spoke unless it was functional. I knew he had friends, but I never met them. He went to homecoming, but never shared pictures. His grades were fine, not stellar, just enough to keep me from having leverage. I convinced myself it was a phase, that he'd grow out of it, come back around. But deep down, I knew he was building a world that didn't include me. Once, I found a receipt for a tattoo consultation tucked into his jeans pocket. He was 17. I confronted him, heart racing with fear and indignation. "You want to scar your body before you even graduate?" "It's not a scar," he said. "It's a story." "What story?" He looked me dead in the eyes. "One I'm not ready to share with you." I grounded him, took his phone, canceled his weekend plans, and later that night, I cried in the bathroom, telling myself it was for his own good. But it wasn't. It was because I'd lost control, and I didn't know how to parent without it. He never got the tattoo, not then anyway. But I think that moment was when something snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet disconnection of a thread pulled too far. He stopped trying after that, graduated with decent grades, got into college, moved out with barely a wave goodbye. No fight, no tantrum, just gone. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been easier if we had screamed at each other, if there'd been some explosive moment I could point to and say, "That's when it all broke." But silence? Silence is so much harder to forgive because you never hear the breaking. You just wake up one day and realize nothing is holding anymore. The last real conversation we had didn't happen on a birthday or a holiday. It happened on a random Thursday evening just after dinner. He was 24, home for a few days during graduate school. The house felt unfamiliar with him in it, like we were two actors trying to play a scene in a set that no longer belonged to either of us. I had made spaghetti, his favorite, or at least it used to be. He pushed the noodles around with his fork. I asked how classes were going. He gave short answers. Then I asked about the boy I'd seen in a photo on his Instagram. A soft, handsome face with eyes that seemed to look straight through the lens. "He's cute," I said, trying for casual. Alex didn't look up. "He's not just cute." There was a long pause. I knew where this was going. I'd known for years. But something in me, something stubborn and scared, needed to make it about me. "You never told me you were serious with someone?" He shrugged. "You never asked." "I'm asking now." He looked at me then, really looked, and I felt it, that weight, that decades-old question behind his eyes. "Do you really want to know, or are you just checking boxes?" "He's my partner," he said. "We live together." I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral, but I felt it twisting anyway. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. He put his fork down. "Because I knew you'd react like this." "Like what?" I said, defensive without even realizing it. "Like it's news. Like I need to make a case for my own life." I wanted to say something clever, reassuring, but I couldn't find the line between truth and performance anymore. He leaned back. You know, he said, when I was a kid, I used to try to be the version of me you'd love more. I opened my mouth to protest. He raised a hand. I'm not saying you didn't love me. I'm saying you only made space for the parts you liked. That's not fair, I whispered. No, he said, it's not, but it's true. I stood up to collect the plates, partly out of habit, mostly to escape the weight of the moment. When I came back from the kitchen, he was still sitting there, arms crossed, face unreadable. I sat down. Alex, I know I made mistakes, but I never stopped caring. I know, he said, but caring without listening isn't love. It's control. The room went quiet. A fly buzzed near the window. The clock ticked. The silence felt heavier than any shouting ever could. Then I said it. I just wish you'd let me be part of your life. And he replied, with a calmness that cracked something deep in me. You had your chance. For 20 years. Now I'm building a life where I don't have to apologize for who I am. He got up, walked to the stairs, paused halfway up. I'm not cutting you out to punish you, he said. I'm doing it because I need peace. And then he was gone. He left the next morning, didn't hug me goodbye, didn't leave a note, just packed quietly and drove away. The house echoed when the door closed. That night, I sat in the living room for hours. Didn't turn on the lights. Didn't cry. Just sat with the weight of a silence I had created. One word, one judgment, one condition at a time. I thought back to when he was 4 and used to crawl into my lap just because. Back then, I was his whole world. Now I wasn't even a stop along the way. The next day, I found his coffee mug in the sink, the one that said, "Good vibes only," chipped on the rim. It still had a bit of coffee left. I held it like it was a part of him, and then I washed it, dried it, and placed it back in the cupboard, as if he'd use it again someday. He didn't block me, but he never called, never replied to texts, never came home for holidays again. And the spaghetti? I never made it again. There's a loneliness that doesn't feel like being alone. It feels like standing in the middle of your kitchen, holding a phone that doesn't ring, and realizing you don't know what voice your son uses anymore. The cadence, the laugh, the pauses between words. 3 years, 3 whole years. Birthdays passed. So did holidays. I still bought him gifts the first year. A sweater I thought he'd like. A book of poetry he used to love. I wrapped them carefully, put them in a drawer. They're still there, dusty now. I didn't send them, didn't want to intrude, but maybe I just couldn't bear the silence in return. The second year, I stopped buying gifts. Instead, I started writing letters. Not to send, just to write. To say the things I hadn't known how to say when he was close enough to hear them. I kept them in a box labeled Alex, just in case. Some were apologies. Some were memories. Some were just pages of me telling him how I missed the sound of his feet on the stairs. I started therapy, not because I thought it would fix anything with Alex, but because I needed to survive being the mother of someone who chose not to speak to me. At first, I was angry. At him, at myself, at the whole world for not handing me a manual on how to love a child the way they need, not the way you know. My therapist asked me something I still carry with me. Were you loving your son or managing him? It hit me like a punch, because I had managed everything. his routines, his expectations, his emotions. I ran motherhood like a project, ticking boxes and measuring outcomes. But love isn't efficient. It's messy, unscripted, vulnerable, and I hadn't known how to be any of those things. One day, about 18 months after our last conversation, I ran into his childhood friend, Theo, at the grocery store. He was older, taller, with a beard that didn't quite suit him. We exchanged polite smiles. I asked about his parents. Then I asked carefully, "Have you spoken to Alex?" Theo paused. "Yeah, a few times. He's doing okay. Really focused on his work." I nodded, heart racing. He doesn't talk about me, does he?" Theo hesitated. "He doesn't say much about the past," he said, "but I think he's still carrying it." I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. Instead, I thanked him, paid for my groceries, drove home, and cried for 23 minutes straight in the driveway. Because there's a special kind of grief in realizing your child is building a life that's lighter without you in it. But there was something else in that pain, something sharp and hopeful. If he was still carrying it, maybe one day he'd be ready to set it down. Maybe I could help. I didn't reach out, not directly, but I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I started living as if he might come back. I stopped performing motherhood in private, stopped holding on to shame like it was proof of my love. I let myself remember him without guilt sometimes. Let myself laugh at an old photo. Let myself imagine. Not hope, not expect, just imagine what it might be like to see him again. People asked now and then. Friends, my sister, a coworker who had met him once. "Have you heard from Alex?" I always said the same thing. "No, but I'm listening." Because that's the only promise I knew I could keep now. Not that I'd be forgiven. Not that he'd return. Just that, if he ever did, I'd be different. Not fixed. Not perfect. Just quiet enough to hear what I never let him say before. It was on his 26th birthday that I finally dialed his number again. Not to talk. Not really. Just to say something into the void that might still carry my voice to him, even if it only reached a voicemail box he never checked. "Hi, Alex. I know it's your birthday. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. That's all. No expectations. Just happy birthday." I hung up. I didn't cry. Not then. That came later. In the laundry room, kneeling beside the dryer, clutching one of his old t-shirts. I kept for no reason other than it smelled like a different life. It became a ritual after that. Voicemails on holidays. Emails on the first of each month. Short ones. Quiet. No pressure. Sometimes I'd share a memory. "Remember when you dressed up as a robot for Halloween and insisted on speaking only in beeps?" Or, "I walked past the creek where you once tried to catch a frog with your bare hands." I smiled for the first time in days. No reply. Ever. But I kept sending them. I told myself he might be reading them. That maybe, just maybe, my words were not disappearing, but being stored, like seeds, waiting for the right season. I didn't beg. I didn't ask him to come home. I didn't try to justify the past. I just kept sending slivers of myself, piece by piece, hoping they'd be less sharp this time. Once I ran into his old art teacher, Mrs. Hanley, at the farmer's market. She was older now, a little slower, but her eyes still had that mischievous gleam. "How's Alex?" she asked, cheerful. I hesitated. She caught the pause. Oh, she said softly. I see. I nodded, embarrassed. He was gifted, she added. Not just in talent, in how he saw the world. I nodded again. He still draws, she said. I looked up, startled. We're connected on Instagram, she smiled gently. He doesn't post often, but when he does, it's beautiful. I didn't ask for the handle, didn't want to intrude, but the knowledge that he was still creating, still expressing himself, did something to me. It reminded me that his silence wasn't emptiness, it was self-preservation, and maybe that was progress. So I kept writing. The emails became letters again, handwritten this time, like the ones I used to tuck into his lunchbox in elementary school. Only now they weren't advice or reminders. They were confessions. I wrote about the time I threw away his theater posters without asking. About the night I read his journal and pretended I hadn't. About how I used to practice smiling in the mirror before he came home, just so I wouldn't pass on my exhaustion. I told him I had started therapy, that I was learning to listen differently, that I no longer needed to be right, just real. There was one letter I never sent, though, the hardest one. It started like this. Alex, you don't owe me a relationship. You don't owe me forgiveness. You don't owe me anything except the truth of who you are. And even if I never get to know that version of you, I want you to know. I love him. Fully, quietly, from afar, if I must. Mom. I kept that letter in my desk drawer because some truths are sacred, and maybe they're not meant to arrive, only to be written. Then, one spring morning, nothing special about it, just soft air and birdsong, I received a package, no return address. Inside, a single photo. A sketch, actually. Pencil, charcoal, stark and tender. It was of a woman, middle-aged, hair swept back, eyes tired but soft, sitting at a table with an envelope in her hand. She was looking out a window, into the light. It wasn't signed, but I knew. The next day, I emailed him again. Just 3 words. Thank you. Always. Still no reply. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was speaking into a void. I felt heard. Not with words, not yet, but with art, with gesture, with something that said, I see you trying, and I'm still here. And that was enough to keep going. It was Aunt Lydia's funeral that brought us back into the same room. I hadn't seen Alex in over 3 years. Not in photos, not by accident, not even glimpsed from across the street. He had vanished from my world completely, a ghost that still haunted my thoughts, but never my sight. Lydia had been my sister's best friend since grade school, but to Alex, she was more than that. The cool aunt, the one who slipped him books, his school band, who taught him how to make proper scrambled eggs, and told him plainly, you don't have to be who your mother needs. You only need to be who you are. They had stayed close even after he left. So when I heard she had passed, cancer, swift and cruel, I knew he'd come. The chapel was small, quiet, sun streaming through tall stained glass windows in slices of blue and amber. I wore a navy dress and sat near the back, my heart a percussion of dread. People filed in quietly. I nodded to familiar faces, and then I saw him, Alex. He walked in alone, in a gray suit that didn't quite fit at the shoulders. He looked older, sharper, but still him. The same quiet intensity in his eyes. He didn't look for me. He sat in the second row, beside a man I didn't recognize. Their hands touched, briefly, gently. I didn't stare, but I watched. Lydia's memorial was full of warmth. Stories, laughter, small tears. A slideshow played photos of her holding Alex as a baby, then a teen, then a young man. In one, she had her arm around him as they stood in front of a mural. I had never seen that image before. He smiled in it in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. After the service, I stayed seated, letting the crowd move around me. I wasn't sure if I should approach. I wasn't sure if I had the right. Then he turned. Our eyes met. He didn't look away. For a second, the world froze. I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt, walked toward him like each step was a question. "Hi, Alex," I said quietly. "Hi, Mom," he replied. His voice, his voice, it hadn't changed. Still low, deliberate, still him. I swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry about Lydia." He nodded. "She mattered." I wanted to say, "So do you." But I didn't. "I'm glad you came," I said instead. He hesitated. "She told me," he said finally, "that you were trying." I blinked. "She didn't give me details," he added. "Just said, you weren't the same." I nodded. "I'm not." Silence again. Then the man beside him, tall, kind eyes, stepped forward. "I'm Eli," he said, offering his hand. I shook it. "Nice to meet you. Alex and we've been together a while." "I know," I said. I'm glad." And I meant it. The three of us stood there, in the strange quiet that follows grief. Then Alex said, "I have to go. We have a flight." "Of course," I said quickly. "Of course." He turned to leave, then paused. "Thank you," he said. I didn't ask for what. I didn't need to. He walked out. I watched him go. And as the doors closed behind him, I felt something shift. Not healed, not mended, but opened. Slightly, willingly. A week later, I received a message. Just a line. "Would you want to talk sometime?" No expectations. I stared at it for 10 full minutes before replying. "I'd like that very much." That was it. No flood of words. No sudden reunions. But something had begun, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe. Maybe silence isn't an ending. Maybe it's just the breath before a new sentence. We met at a small cafe just outside the city. Neutral ground. Not the diner we used to go to after school. Not the place we ran into each other that one Christmas and pretended we hadn't. This was a new space. A clean table. He chose it. I agreed. I arrived early, of course. Nerves made me punctual. I ordered chamomile tea because I needed my hands to do something other than tremble. The cafe was quiet. Sunlight slanting through wide windows, soft jazz playing overhead. It smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast. When Alex walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Not because he looked different. He didn't. Not really. But because I wasn't looking through the eyes of a mother desperate to fix things. I was just looking at him as he was. He wore a green sweater I'd never seen before. His hair was longer. He moved with a calm I didn't remember. When he sat down, he smiled. Tentative, polite. "Hi," he said. "Hi." Silence stretched between us. Not hostile, just uncertain. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said. He looked at me carefully. "I almost didn't." I nodded. "But I've been thinking about the sketch," he continued. "The one I sent." "I still have it," I said quickly. "It's on my desk." He smiled faintly. "It was a risk." I know. Another pause. Then I said something I hadn't rehearsed. You don't have to make this easier for me. He blinked. I mean it, I added. You don't owe me anything. Not your time, not your presence, not even this meeting. His jaw tightened. That's new. I'm trying to be. We sat there for a moment, just breathing in the same air, just coexisting. Then he asked, why now? Why did you start reaching out again after so long? I stared into my tea, then met his eyes. Because I finally realized I'd rather be a mother who waits in silence than one who disappears into pride. He didn't reply, but he didn't look away either. I continued. I used to think love meant shaping you into someone the world could understand. But the world was never the problem. I was. You were scared, he said. Yes. Of me? Of losing you. Of failing. Of seeing parts of you I didn't understand and thinking they meant I'd done something wrong. He nodded slowly. You weren't wrong. I was just different. I see that now. He sat back in his chair, folded his arms. I don't hate you, he said finally. I never did. Tears pricked my eyes. But I needed space, he added. I needed to grow without hearing your voice in my head, telling me I was making a mistake. I get that. And I didn't want to come back to a version of you that hadn't changed. I wouldn't want that either. We fell quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was tender, careful. He looked down at the table. You know, I used to write you letters too. I froze, but I never sent them, he said, because I didn't trust myself not to ask for something you couldn't give. I would have tried, I said. I know, he smiled. But back then, your trying still came with terms. I nodded. He reached into his bag, pulled out a small envelope. This one I want you to read. I took it with both hands, heart hammering. It was addressed simply, Mom. I didn't open it there. I didn't ask to. Instead, I tucked it into my purse, like something sacred. We talked for another hour. Nothing big. He told me about his job, something with research and design, about Eli, about their dog named Clover. I told him about the garden I started, the books I'd finally read, the nights I still set a plate for him out of habit, then laugh at myself and put it back. We didn't hug when we left, but his hand touched mine across the table, briefly, and that was enough. When I got home, I sat at my desk and opened the envelope. Inside, a single page, a drawing, another sketch. This one was of a bridge, fragile, incomplete, still under construction. At the bottom, 3 words, still building, Mom. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to name. Hope. Rebuilding with Alex didn't happen in a straight line. It wasn't some miraculous return to weekly phone calls and Sunday dinners. It was more like learning a new language, one word at a time, with long pauses in between. At first, our conversations were short. He'd text me a photo of Clover, their scruffy little dog, curled in a pile of laundry. I'd reply with something simple. Looks cozy. He'd send a thumbs up, but it was something. We moved from there to monthly calls. Scheduled, predictable, 15 minutes at first, then 20, then let's just talk until one of us gets bored. We didn't talk about the past much, not directly, but sometimes, in the quiet, it slipped through, like the time he mentioned how Eli had taught him to cook. He said it gently, but it landed like a stone. I almost replied, I used to try, but stopped myself. Because I had tried, but maybe not in the way he needed. So instead, I asked, what's your favorite thing to make together? He blinked at me on the video call, surprised. Shakshuka, he said finally. It's kind of messy, but warm, comforting. I'd love to try it someday, I said. He smiled. Maybe. And that maybe meant more than any yes ever could. On my end, I started keeping small notes. A list of things he liked, things he mentioned in passing, a poet he quoted, a coffee brand he preferred, the way he laughed when I told him I'd started yoga and fell flat on my face during downward dog. Progress, he said, looks like bruises. One afternoon in late spring, he called unexpectedly. I know this is last minute, he began, voice uncertain, but Eli and I have to go out of town next weekend. Our dog sitter canceled. Would you? I didn't let him finish. Yes, absolutely, he laughed. You don't even know the details. I don't care. I'd love to. He paused. Thank you. That Friday, I drove to their townhouse. It was bright, filled with plants, art, and little pieces of their life together. Not curated for guests, but real. Alex walked me through the dog's routine, where the food was, the emergency contacts. Eli handed me a spare key and said, make yourself at home. As they were about to leave, Alex stood at the door, hesitating. I left a few sketchbooks on the desk, he said, eyes not quite meeting mine. You can look, if you want. I swallowed hard. Only if you're sure. He nodded. I am. After they left, I wandered the space like it was a museum of the son I used to know, and the man he had become. The sketchbooks were filled with drawings of quiet moments, a coffee mug steaming in a window, two hands reaching across a couch, a woman sitting alone in a garden surrounded by wild roses. On the last page, a single word, becoming. That night, Clover curled beside me on the couch. I made tea, watched a show I didn't understand, laughed at the dogs snoring, and I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Belonging, not as a mother who had earned her way back, but as a person being invited in. When they returned Sunday night, Alec asked, how was she? She snores like an old man, I joked. He grinned. She does. Then he said, thanks again. And for the first time, I didn't say, of course. I said, you're welcome. Because this wasn't obligation. This was trust. Later that week, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a framed sketch, the one of the woman in the garden, wild roses blooming around her. No note, just the art. I hung it in the hallway, across from my bedroom, so I could see it every morning and remember. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means being willing to bloom again, even after years of silence, even after losing your child, and slowly, gently, being allowed to love them again. It's Thanksgiving now. Not the first one we've spent together since the silence ended, but the first where it feels unafraid. Alex and Eli invited me weeks ago. No hesitations, no careful phrasing. Just, come spend the day with us. Bring pie. So I did. Pumpkin, of course. Homemade. A little burnt around the edges. But still mine. When I rang the doorbell, Clover barked like she remembered me. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary and warm bread. Eli greeted me in an apron with flour on his cheek. Alex came down the stairs, holding a stack of napkins. He smiled when he saw me. Not politely, not cautiously, just smiled. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. We hugged. It wasn't long or tight, but it was easy. The table was simple, set for four: Alex, Eli, me, and a chair they said was just in case someone stops by. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. During dinner, we didn't talk about politics or the past. We talked about Eli's obsession with crossword puzzles, the neighbor's cat that kept sneaking in, the time Alex burned rice so badly the pan had to be thrown out. I laughed more than I expected. At one point, Alex got up to refill the wine and touched my shoulder as he passed. Light, thoughtless, natural. And I thought, this is what forgiveness feels like. Not a grand speech, not a teary reunion, just a hand on your shoulder in the middle of a story. After pie, we sat in the living room. Clover lay between us, snoring. Alex turned on a jazz playlist. Eli poured tea. Then Alex said, "You want to see something?" "Always." He handed me a new sketchbook. The first page was a drawing of a river with stepping stones. The second, 2 chairs in a garden. One empty, one occupied. The third, a mother and son walking side by side. Not holding hands, but moving in the same direction. I flipped slowly, careful not to breathe too loud. On the last page, a house. Familiar. Ours. The old one. But with light in every window. Below it, a single line in his handwriting. Love without condition. Home without fear. I didn't speak. I just reached for his hand and held it. He let me. We sat that way for a while. The sketchbook on my lap. The dog snoring. The tea warm in my hand. And I realized something. I would never fully undo the hurt. I couldn't erase the years of pressure, the weight of my expectations, or the silence that came after. But I didn't need to. What we had now wasn't a do-over. It was something braver. It was a love that had passed through fire and come out quieter, but stronger. After dinner, as I was putting on my coat, Alex said, "You coming for Christmas?" I blinked. "You want me to?" He smiled. "Yeah, I do." As I drove home that night, I thought about how far we'd come, from slammed doors and unanswered calls, from pain I didn't know how to name, from a goodbye that felt final, to a beginning neither of us expected. Love isn't loud, I've learned. It doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes, love is a place at the table, a sketch on a page, a pie, a dog, a shared smile. Sometimes love is just this, being allowed back in, and learning, day by day, how to stay.